When an HOA cop pointed a gun at my wife, he didn't know she was the real county sheriff, and that was his biggest mistake. Let that sink in for a second. Picture it, a quiet suburban evening in Austin, Texas, the smell of ribs sizzling on the grill, laughter floating through the backyard, and then, bam, some wannabe rent-a-cop with a power trip and a pistol decides to play Dirty Harry. At my wife. My wife, who's spent the last 15 years locking up actual criminals while this guy probably spent his morning yelling at kids for skateboarding. If you're already fuming, good. You're in the right place. Have you ever been threatened by an HOA or someone abusing their power? Drop your story in the comments, I know you've got one. I'm John Walker, a 50-year-old retired veteran who's seen enough nonsense in my time to fill a book, but nothing, compares to the circus that unfolded in my own backyard. My wife, Emily, is the county sheriff, the kind of woman who can stare down a felon without blinking but still makes the best peach cobbler this side of the Colorado River. We live in a modest suburban house just outside Austin, a place we bought for its big backyard and quiet street, perfect for gardening, barbecues, and keeping our old hound dog, Rusty, from barking at every squirrel. It's our slice of freedom, and it's ours, not under the iron fist of any HOA. Or so we thought. Enter Karen Mitchell, the self-appointed dictator of the Sunny Hills Homeowners Association. You know the type, clipboard in hand, a fake smile that screams, "I'm billing you for breathing," and a rulebook thicker than the Bible. Karen's the kind of person who'd measure your grass with a ruler and send you a violation notice for being half an inch too tall. Her HOA doesn't technically have jurisdiction over our property, our lot's just outside their boundary, but that hasn't stopped her from trying to lord over us like we're her serfs. She's sent letters about my '73 Chevy pickup, an eyesore, complained about Rusty's occasional woof, a public nuisance, and once even griped that our mailbox wasn't aesthetic. Lady, it's a mailbox, not a Monet. Most folks in the neighborhood roll their eyes at Karen's antics, but they put up with it because nobody wants her knocking on their door at 7 a.m. with a fine for a crooked shutter. Me? I'm not big on bowing to petty tyrants. I spent 20 years in the army dealing with real threats, not self-important busybodies. Emily's the same, she's too busy running the sheriff's department to care about Karen's little fiefdom. We've kept the peace, mostly, ignoring her letters and tossing her fines in the trash. But Karen wasn't content to leave well enough alone. Oh no. She had to escalate things. And she picked the worst possible day to do it. It was a Saturday in spring 2025, one of those perfect Texas evenings where the sun's dipping low, the air's warm but not sticky, and the beer's cold enough to fog up the bottle. We were hosting a backyard barbecue, nothing fancy, just some friends, family, and a few of Emily's off-duty deputies swapping stories and devouring ribs. The kids were tossing a frisbee, Rusty was napping under the oak tree, and I was flipping burgers while arguing with my brother-in-law about whether brisket's better smoked or grilled. Smoked, obviously. It was the kind of night that makes you glad to be alive. Then Karen showed up. Not alone, mind you, she'd brought her new pet, a security guard named Bob, decked out in a uniform that looked like he'd raided a police costume shop. Badge, holster, the works. The guy strutted into our backyard like he owned it, Karen trailing behind with her usual smirk. They were there about a noise complaint, she said, because apparently our laughter was disturbing the peace. Never mind that it was 6 p.m. on a Saturday, and the only thing louder than our party was Karen's sense of entitlement. I tried to keep things civil, explaining that we weren't in her HOA, this was private property, and we'd keep the music down. But Bob, he wasn't having it. He puffed out his chest, hand hovering over his holster, and started barking orders like he was auditioning for a cop show. Emily, calm as ever, stepped forward to talk him down. That's when it happened. Bob, in a move so stupid it deserves its own award, pulled his gun and pointed it at her. My wife. The sheriff. In our own backyard. I won't spoil the rest just yet, but let's just say Bob's little stunt didn't end the way he planned. That moment, that split second when his shaky hand aimed a pistol at Emily, lit a fire in me. In us. This wasn't just about a barbecue anymore. It was about standing up to bullies who think they can rule your life because they've got a badge, or a fake one. It was about reminding people like Karen that power doesn't come from a clipboard or a hired goon. And it was about making sure nobody else in our neighborhood would have to deal with this nonsense again. So, buckle up. This is the story of how we took on the HOA, exposed their wannabe cop for what he was, and turned Karen's little empire into a cautionary tale. It's got everything: humor, justice, and a barbecue that'll go down in history. Stick around, because you're not gonna want to miss what happened next. It all started with a barbecue. Not just any barbecue, mind you, but the kind that makes you feel like life's worth living. Picture a spring evening in suburban Austin, the kind where the sky's painted pink and orange, the breeze carries just a hint of cedar, and the grill's pumping out enough smoky goodness to make your mouth water from 2 blocks away. That was our Saturday, and I, John Walker, was in my element, tending the fire, sneaking a cold one, and hosting a small crowd of the people I love most. My wife, Emily, was there too, her sheriff's badge tucked away for once, laughing with her deputies and stealing bites of my famous jalapeno cornbread. It was perfect. Until it wasn't. Let me back up a bit. Emily and I have been in this house for a decade, a cozy spot just outside the clutches of the Sunny Hills HOA. I'm a retired veteran, 50 years young, and I spend my days tinkering in the garden, restoring my '73 Chevy pickup and keeping our hound dog, Rusty, from chasing every lizard in Travis County. Emily's the county sheriff, a job that keeps her on call 24/7 but hasn't dulled her knack for making folks feel at ease. She's the calm to my stubborn, the one who talks me down when I'm ready to cuss out the next door-to-door salesman. Together, we've built a life that's simple but full: good food, good friends, and a backyard that's seen more laughter than most comedy clubs. But there's a shadow over our little paradise, and its name is Karen Mitchell. The Sunny Hills HOA president is a walking caricature of bureaucratic nonsense, the kind of person who'd write you up for having the wrong shade of beige on your shutters. Her HOA doesn't technically cover our property, we made damn sure of that when we bought the place, but Karen's got a habit of acting like she owns the whole neighborhood. Over the years, she's sent us letters about my truck, unsightly, Rusty's barking, disruptive, and even the time I put up a flagpole for Veterans Day, unapproved structure. I've got a drawer full of her complaints, right next to the junk mail and expired coupons. Most of it's laughable, but it's the principle that grates. Who gave this woman the right to play queen? Karen's antics aren't just our problem. Neighbors whisper about her over fences, swapping stories of fines for kids' chalk drawings or unauthorized flower beds. The woman's got a reputation, and not the good kind. Reddit's full of tales like ours, HOAs hiring private security to flex muscle they don't have, strutting around like they're the law when they're barely above mall cops. Karen, though, took it to a new level. She didn't just want control, she wanted worship. That brings us to the barbecue. It was a private affair, maybe 20 folks, family, a few close friends, and some of Emily's off-duty deputies who'd become like family themselves. We had ribs on the grill, a cooler full of Shiner Bock, and a Bluetooth speaker playing Willie Nelson just loud enough to set the mood. The kids were running around, the adults were swapping stories, and Rusty was snoring under the picnic table, dreaming of dropped brisket. Emily was in rare form, her hair down, teasing me about my secret barbecue sauce recipe. Spoiler, it's just extra garlic and a prayer. For a moment, everything was right with the world. Then Karen rolled up, and she wasn't alone. Trailing her was a guy who looked like he'd been cast as budget cop in a low-rent action flick. His name, we'd later learn, was Bob, the HOA's new security guard. Bob was decked out in a uniform that screamed, "I wish I was a real cop," navy blue, badge gleaming, a holster strapped to his hip like he was ready to take down a cartel. The getup was so close to a police uniform it could have fooled you at a glance, especially if you didn't know better. And that's the thing, plenty of folks in Sunny Hills didn't know better. Karen had been parading Bob around the neighborhood for weeks, letting people think her HOA had hired actual law enforcement. Spoiler alert, they hadn't. Private security guards like Bob have about as much authority as a crossing guard, and they sure as hell aren't supposed to play cowboy with a gun. When Karen and Bob marched into our backyard, uninvited, it was like a storm cloud rolling over a picnic. Karen's smirk was dialed to 11, and Bob stood there, chest puffed out, like he was about to read us our rights. The music faltered, conversations died, and even Rusty lifted his head, sensing the vibe shift. I set down my tongs, wiped my hands on my apron, and walked over, already knowing this wasn't going to be a friendly chat. Karen launched into her spiel about a noise complaint, claiming our barbecue was disturbing the community. At 6 p.m. on a Saturday. With music quieter than the average car stereo. I glanced at Emily, who was watching with that calm, don't make me get up look she reserves for rowdy drunks at the county fair. Her deputies, sprawled in lawn chairs, were starting to sit up, eyeing Bob's uniform with the kind of scrutiny only cops can muster. The air was thick, and not just with barbecue smoke. Karen had no idea what she'd just walked into, and Bob. Poor Bob was about to learn the hard way that you don't bring a fake badge to a real sheriff's party. Then things took a dangerous turn. 1 minute, I'm standing in my backyard, tongs in hand, trying to keep the peace with Karen Mitchell and her discount RoboCop sidekick, Bob. The next, I'm watching this clown point a gun at my wife, Emily, the county sheriff, like he's starring in some unhinged HOA action movie. Let me set the scene. It's a perfect spring evening in Austin, our barbecue's in full swing, and Karen's just crashed the party with a noise complaint flimsier than a paper plate. The air's thick with tension, the ribs are sizzling, and our hound dog, Rusty, is growling low, like he knows something's about to go sideways. He wasn't wrong. Karen, with her trademark smirk, was rattling off nonsense about how our private gathering, on our own property, mind you, violated some imaginary HOA rule. Never mind that we're not even in her jurisdiction. She stood there, clipboard in hand, acting like she'd caught us running a speakeasy instead of grilling burgers at 6 p.m. I tried to reason with her, keeping my voice steady, explaining for the 100th time that our house isn't part of Sunny Hills HOA. Karen, I said, this is our backyard, our rules. We'll turn the music down, but you need to leave. Simple, right? Wrong. Bob, the new security guard, wasn't here for diplomacy. Decked out in his police knockoff uniform, complete with a shiny badge and a holster he clearly loved a little too much, he decided this was his moment to shine. He stepped forward, cutting me off mid-sentence, and barked, "You need to comply, sir, or we'll have a problem." Sir. Comply. I've faced down drill sergeants and desert storms, and this guy thought he could intimidate me in my own backyard? I almost laughed. Almost. Emily, who'd been watching from the picnic table with her deputies, set down her beer and walked over. If you've never seen my wife in action, let me paint the picture. She's 5 feet 6 inches, cool as a winter morning, and carries herself with the kind of authority that makes hardened criminals rethink their life choices. She's not loud or flashy, but when she speaks, people listen. "Gentlemen," she said, nodding at Bob and me, "let's all take a breath and sort this out." Her tone was pure sheriff, calm, but with an edge that says, "Don't test me." Bob, though? Bob didn't get the memo. Maybe it was the fake badge going to his head, or maybe he'd watched too many cop shows, but he misread Emily's calm for weakness. Big mistake. He turned to her, puffing out his chest, and snapped, "Ma'am, you need to back off and let us handle this." "Ma'am?" I saw one of Emily's deputies choke on his brisket, trying not to laugh. Emily raised an eyebrow, still steady, and said, "I'm just trying to keep things civil. Why don't you tell me who you are and what authority you think you have here?" That's when Bob lost it. Maybe he felt Karen's eyes on him, or maybe he was just itching to play hero, but he took a step toward Emily, hand on his holster, and, God help me, I still can't believe this, pulled his gun. Pointed it right at her, finger twitching near the trigger, and growled, "I said back off, now." The backyard went dead silent. The music stopped. The kids froze. Even Rusty was up, hackles raised, ready to take a chunk out of this idiot. My heart was pounding, not out of fear but pure, white-hot rage. This wannabe cop was pointing a loaded weapon at my wife, in our home, over a damn barbecue. Emily didn't flinch. Didn't even blink. She looked at Bob like he was a toddler throwing a tantrum, then slowly reached into her pocket and pulled out her sheriff's badge. Holding it up, she said, "Clear as day, I'm Emily Walker, Travis County Sheriff. Lower your weapon, son, before you make a mistake you can't undo." The color drained from Bob's face faster than a Shiner Bock at a tailgate. His eyes flicked from the badge to Emily's face, then to the half-dozen off-duty deputies now standing, hands on their own holsters, staring him down like wolves circling a stray dog. Bob's gun wavered, then dropped to his side, his bravado evaporating. Before he could stammer an excuse, two of Emily's deputies were on him, disarming him and pinning his arms behind his back. Cuffs clicked shut, and Bob was suddenly very interested in studying his boots. Karen, who'd been silent through all this, finally found her voice, shrieking, "This is outrageous." Bob was just doing his job. Doing his job. I couldn't help it, I laughed. "Karen," I said, "your cop just tried to arrest the sheriff. That's peak HOA stupidity." One of the deputies snorted, and even Emily cracked a smile, though her eyes were still locked on Bob. Here's the thing, Bob's little stunt wasn't just dumb, it was illegal. In Texas, impersonating a police officer is a crime, and pointing a gun at someone without cause? That's assault with a deadly weapon, minimum. Karen's HOA had hired this clown, dressed him up like a cop, and let him loose to terrorize people. And now, because of their arrogance, Bob was in cuffs, Karen was sputtering, and our barbecue had turned into a crime scene. But this was just the beginning. Emily and I weren't about to let this slide. Karen thought she was untouchable, but she just poked the wrong sheriff. And me? I was ready to make sure her little empire paid the price. That's when we decided to take them down. The barbecue was over, the ribs cold, and our backyard still humming with the aftershock of Bob, the HOA's fake cop, pointing a gun at Emily, my wife, the actual county sheriff. The image of that idiot's shaky hand on his pistol was burned into my brain, and I wasn't about to let it fade. Neither was Emily. She'd stayed cool as ice when it happened, disarming the situation with her badge and a stare that could freeze lava, but now we were pissed. Karen Mitchell and her Sunny Hills HOA had crossed a line, and we were done playing nice. This wasn't just about us anymore, it was about making sure no one else in our neighborhood got bullied by a clipboard-wielding tyrant and her armed stooge. The next morning, with Bob in custody and Karen's indignant shriek still echoing in our ears, Emily and I sat down with a pot of coffee and a plan. Step 1, call our lawyer, Sarah, a pit bull in a pantsuit who'd once made a car dealership cry over a lemon law case. We laid out the whole mess, Karen's uninvited invasion, Bob's police impersonating getup, and the gun he'd aimed at Emily over a non-existent noise complaint. Sarah's eyes lit up like a kid on Christmas. "Oh, this is good," she said, scribbling notes. "This is very good." Turns out, the HOA had stepped in it, big time. Sarah dug into the details and found that Bob wasn't just a moron, he was an unlicensed moron. In Texas, security guards need state certification to carry firearms, and Bob's credentials were as real as his cop badge. Worse, the HOA's security contract, which Sarah got her hands on through a public records request, showed they'd hired a fly-by-night outfit that didn't bother with proper training or licensing. And that police-like uniform Bob was so proud of. Designed by the HOA to look as close to law enforcement as they could get without crossing the legal line. Except they had crossed it. Sarah grinned. This isn't just negligence. It's fraud. And impersonating a cop. That's a felony. We didn't stop there. Emily, with her sheriff's resources, confirmed Bob was facing charges for assault with a deadly weapon and impersonating a police officer. His little stunt was going to cost him more than a job. But we wanted the HOA itself, Karen's precious kingdom, to feel the heat. So, we filed a lawsuit against Sunny Hills HOA for hiring unqualified security, allowing illegal impersonation, and endangering residents. Sarah called it a slam dunk, but I just called it justice. Karen thought she was the law. Now she was about to learn what real law looks like. Word spread fast. By the next week, our neighbors were knocking on our door, sharing their own Karen horror stories. There was Mike, who'd been fined for parking his work van in his own driveway, Lisa, whose kids got a cease and desist for their lemonade stand, and old Mr. Jenkins, who'd been hassled over his non-writer's note. The following sentence may need tweaking for flow. Growing community support helped us understand how deep the frustration ran with the HOA's overreach. People were fed up, and our fight was becoming their fight. We set up a group chat, and soon, we had a dozen neighbors ready to testify about the HOA's strong-arm tactics. It was like watching a dam break. Once the first crack appeared, the whole thing started to crumble. Emily and I kept the pressure on. We leaked the security contract to a local news blog, and the story blew up. HOA hires fake cop who pulls gun on sheriff was too juicy for the internet to ignore. Reddit threads exploded, X posts racked up thousands of likes, and suddenly, Karen's HOA was the poster child for petty tyranny. The best part? Every time Karen tried to spin it, we were just ensuring community safety. Someone would repost Bob's mugshot or a clip of Emily calmly flashing her badge. The internet ate it up. Humor kept us sane through it all. One neighbor started calling Bob Officer Barbecue, and it stuck. I couldn't help but crack a smile every time I heard it. At one point, while we were sorting through legal paperwork, I looked at Emily and said, "You know, if Karen wanted to play sheriff, she should have at least gotten a better costume." Emily laughed, a rare break in her laser focus. "John," she said, her real crime was thinking she could outsmart us. Legally, we were on solid ground. HOAs can't enforce rules on non-members like us, and they sure as hell can't hire goons to play cop. Sites like Find HOA Law backed up what Sarah told us. Karen's security scheme was a blatant overreach, and the courts don't take kindly to fraud or endangerment. With Bob's arrest record, the HOA's shady contract, and a growing stack of neighbor complaints, we had enough to bury them. As the lawsuit took shape, I felt a fire I hadn't felt since my army days. This wasn't just about protecting our home, it was about showing Karen and every HOA dictator out there that power isn't a badge or a gun. It's accountability. And we were coming for theirs. And just like that, the HOA's reign ended. 3 weeks after Bob's boneheaded stunt at our barbecue, pointing a gun at my wife, Emily, the county sheriff, like he was some budget vigilante, the Sunny Hills HOA was facing its day of reckoning. Emily and I, fueled by righteous anger and a lawyer named Sarah who could smell blood in the water, had built a case that was less a lawsuit and more a guillotine. Karen Mitchell, the HOA's clipboard queen, thought she could bully our neighborhood with fake cops and petty fines. Now, she was about to learn what happens when you poke a veteran, a sheriff, and a fed-up community all at once. The courtroom was packed, a mix of neighbors, reporters, and a few HOA diehards still clinging to Karen's sinking ship. Emily and I sat up front, her sheriff's calm on full display, while I tried not to smirk every time Sarah dropped another bombshell. Our evidence was a knockout: Bob's arrest record for assault and impersonating an officer, the HOA's shady security contract that hired unlicensed goons, and a stack of neighbor testimonies thicker than Karen's rulebook. Mike talked about his fined work van, Lisa recounted the lemonade stand fiasco, and Mr. Jenkins, bless him, went off about his non-compliant roses like they were a war crime. The judge, a no-nonsense woman who looked like she'd seen every flavor of stupid, listened with a raised eyebrow. Sarah laid it out plain. The HOA had hired an unqualified security firm, dressed Bob in a police-like uniform to deceive residents, and let him run wild with a gun he had no business carrying. It wasn't just negligence, it was fraud, endangerment, and a clear violation of Texas law. Karen, testifying in her own defense, tried to spin it as community safety, but her voice cracked when Sarah held up a photo of Bob's knockoff badge next to Emily's real one. The room stifled laughs. Even the bailiff coughed to cover a chuckle. The judge's ruling hit like a thunderclap. The HOA was fined heavily for hiring unlicensed security and ordered to disband their fake police force immediately. Their security contract was voided, and they were slapped with punitive damages for putting residents at risk. But the real kicker. The judge, citing the HOA's pattern of overreach, forced Karen to resign as president. Effective immediately. The board was also required to issue a public apology to Emily and me, printed in the local paper and posted on every lamppost in Sunny Hills. When the gavel dropped, the courtroom erupted in cheers. Mike high-fived Lisa, and Mr. Jenkins waved his cane like a victory flag. Karen slunk out, her usual smirk replaced by a look like she'd swallowed a lemon. A neighbor in the back row couldn't resist. She called out, "Looks like you're no longer the sheriff." "Oh wait, you never were." The laughter followed Karen all the way to the parking lot. Bob, meanwhile, wasn't there to enjoy the show. He'd already been convicted of assault and impersonation, trading his fake badge for a cell. Last I heard, he was serving time, probably regretting the day he thought pointing a gun at Emily was a career move. Back home, we decided to celebrate the only way we knew how, with a freedom barbecue. We threw open our backyard, fired up the grill, and invited the whole neighborhood, except Karen and her handful of loyalists, who were politely told to stay on their side of the fence. The turnout was huge. Neighbors brought brisket, beer, and stories of HOA nonsense we hadn't even heard yet. Emily's deputies showed up, too, swapping their badges for aprons and cracking jokes about Officer Barbecue. Rusty, our hound dog, waddled around, basking in belly rubs and dropped scraps. The Bluetooth speaker blared Willie Nelson, louder than ever, and nobody complained. Not one. As the sun set, painting the Austin sky in hues of fire, I looked around at the laughter, the clinking bottles, and Emily's smile, her real one, not the sheriff's mask. This was more than a win. It was a reminder that no one, not even a self-proclaimed HOA dictator, gets to trample your home or your peace. Sites like Bankrate back this up. Courts routinely side with residents against HOA overreach, especially when it involves illegal stunts like impersonation. Our fight wasn't just for us, it was for every neighbor who'd ever gotten a fine for a crooked shutter or a wrong mailbox. And judging by the crowd in our backyard, they knew it. So, if you loved this story of standing up to HOA tyranny, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell for more tales of justice and laughs. Drop your own HOA horror story in the comments, I know you've got one. And next time you fire up the grill, raise a glass to freedom, to neighbors who've got your back, and to the kind of victory that tastes better than any barbecue sauce. Even mine.